Now that I finished Final Fantasy VII Remake, I wanted to find out what other people think about it. When I searched YouTube Final Fantasy VII Remake is, the first two suggestions are trash and bad. Let's start with a strong video.
Final Fantasy is the worst game I have ever played in my entire life.
For real? Final Fantasy VII Remake is the worst game you ever played? How many games did you play? I get it that the game is not perfect, but what games did you play before Final Fantasy VII Remake? If you said that you only played Final Fantasy VII the original, maybe I agree.
I tried to level up, even though this game does not want you to grind, even though this game is linear as hell. It's like, no. I went back, I went down the same corridor 3 or 4 times, waited for enemies to respawn, just because I wanted to enjoy it.
I agree, I tried it too, but when I saw how much I wasted my time, I thought that the game doesn't need you to grind or that you can do it later into the game. Guess what? I was right. You can grind very easily without wasting time. For real now. If the lack of grinding made you hate the game, why not play the original or at least fight games that need you to grind over and over?
The one thing that gave me pause, the one moment that gave me pause that made me hate the game for the first time, is when they were storming up before the plate fell.
The thing that made you hate the game for the first time was right before the plate fell? So you don't hate the boring side quests? You don't hate that the game had too much stuff that you don't care about? You don't care that they didn't try to follow the original story? Stuff that most of the people are mad about?
The future's to you now. Spoiler the alert, he's still alive. We had to go through 2 death scenes with pigs, and he's alive? We went through all of that, and he's alive? And you know who got a lesser death thing? Jessie! She got one little death thing. And then, well, who knows? She actually might be alive too. And who knows? Wedge could be alive because he disappears. Every time you think Wedge is dead, he just disappears and then he shows up again.
So what you're saying is that you hate the game because the people didn't stay dead. I kind of agree. They showed a lot of useless stuff, but they didn't show why and how was it possible for Biggs to survive. And we still don't know anything about Jessie. Maybe we find out in the next part, but I kind of agree with your point. Biggs is alive for some reason, but we never see how was that possible. With this, I think we already know that Aerith will not die in the remake, because they clearly don't want to kill anybody.
And then I got to Shinra, and I don't give a I'm ready to beat the game. I put 40 hours into it already. And it just felt like the creators were like, just gotta, and they're like, hey, let me explain how Shinra works. Skip that cutscene.
I cut a lot of video, but he always complains about putting a lot of time into the game. Why do you play a game if your biggest complaint is that you play it for too long? I played Witcher 3 for almost 200 hours. I played Persona 3, 4 and 5 for over 100 hours each. But I don't talk about it like it's something bad. I agree if you get a lot of boring side quests and fillers that Final Fantasy VII had, the remake. But you say it like you want to finish as many games as possible, not enjoying the ride. And he said he skipped Shinra's story. I get that you got fed with the side missions and some fillers, but instead of skipping that, you skipped Shinra's story. This is one of the most important parts of the story. If you want to play the game only for the gameplay, I understand, but the game is remembered because of the story, even if we don't know how the remake will be, because the ending of part 1 is just that, the ending of part 1 and not the ending of Final Fantasy VII Remake.
Because I just wanted them to shut the f*** up. Just shut the fuck up, Barrett. We get it. We get it. You're an asshole. I'm sorry, Barrett. You're kind of an asshole. You don't care about other people. You just care about your mission. And people might think that's altruistic or whatever, but you're a fucking asshole. And I'm tired of hearing it from you. Tired of hearing it from you. The whole game.
How is Barrett an asshole? He tries to stop Shinra from destroying the planet. He does this because he cares about the people. And especially his daughter, who has no future if Shinra will destroy the planet. He uses his money to pay others. He doesn't make money if he does the mission. How does he care about himself? He is just mad that nobody thinks about the future of the planet, and he always tries to force his beliefs every time he can. You may not agree with him and don't care about the planet, but that doesn't make him self-centered or an asshole.
I liked you in the original Final Fantasy VII. I fucking hate you in this one. You're unbearable. Some people talked about how his voice acting was bad. What are you gonna do? I don't really care about that. I just thought he was an insufferable prick.
If you like Barrett in the original, how is he different now? The main difference is that he has a voice now, but he's the same guy. I don't know who didn't like the voice acting, because I think the voice actor did a great job, at least for the English version. You don't explain what exactly made you hate him in the remake.
It's like, hey, remember that boss fight? Here's another boss fight. Here's another boss fight. Here's another boss fight. Here's another boss fight. Boss fights over and over and over again. Oh, I hate it. I hate it so fucking much. Like in the original game, you can grind for a while, go to a boss fight. Grind for a little while, go to a boss fight. Go into a town, meet people, grind a little while. That's not this game. This game's not a grinding game. It is go through a corridor, go to your next thing. Some people can beat this in 25 hours, 20, 30 hours. They're done with this game.
I guess you love grinding because you don't say that the boss fights were boring. You just hated that you can't grind as much. And you can grind, but the best way is to use the Colosseum or the VR world. And if some people can beat the game in 20 hours, how is that bad? Is it too long or too short? Because Breath of the Wild can be finished in 40 minutes. But that's not what makes it a great game.
The mayor, by the way, there's some mayor. Guess what? I skipped his whole plot line, and it didn't matter. I don't know who the fucking mayor is. I don't give a about the mayor.
Do you know why you don't know who the mayor is? And why you don't give a fuck about him? Because you skipped that part. And the mayor part was one of the most important parts of the story. If you got that mad, then why even continue the game? You started skipping the story, you felt like it's a job finishing the game.
There's ghosts. Let's deal with them. But like our daughter might die and our friends might die. Yeah, but there's ghost kids. There's some stupid ghost kids we need to worry about. Why do you care about these ghost kids when you're about to die or people you know are about to die?
Yes, this is one of the fillers that I hated in Final Fantasy VII Remake. I don't care about the ghost part. If they want a good story that everyone is interested in, they should cut stories like this from the game. You try to go to save everyone in the main mission, but these useless Casper ghosts come to play. This kind of stuff makes you hate the good parts. Who had the idea to add this to the game is an idiot. People don't want games that are over 50 hours, we just want games that are fun to play or has a good story.
I went on 3 different tangents. Rufus Shinra. Let's get back to that stupid motherfucker. So I get to him, fine, yeah, I just did a boss fight, let's do this. And I'm doing the fight and I'm enjoying it. But then I remember, oh, this same exact fight was in Yakuza, at the end of Yakuza. The same exact fight on a roof, on somebody's business, with a gun against you. Same exact fight. I had to dodge, hit, do the same exact thing, the same thing in the original Yakuza game.
Do you know where you see the same fight? Final Fantasy VII Original. I know, it is hard to remember everything, but the fight from the original was kind of the same as the remake. So yeah, they didn't need to steal the fight from anybody else, because it already existed in the original.
Different from Final Fantasy? Why did you have to take Final Fantasy VII and put it in this thing that everyone hates or everyone has hated? Why? Can we try something new? It could have been a chance to do anything different, anything new, anything like anything. The combat was the only new good thing, and all you did was copy God of War? Like, that's it? Like, I like...
Dude, what the fuck? If you want something different from a Final Fantasy game, then don't buy Final Fantasy VII Remake. Also, how is Final Fantasy VII Remake like God of War? You make some good points, then you talk that Final Fantasy Remake is like Yakuza and God of War. I agree with you that they added so much useless stuff that the story didn't need and some boring side quests, but I never felt that the game is like a Yakuza or a God of War. By that logic, any shooter game is a Counter-Strike game, any RPG game is a Final Fantasy game, all fighting games are Taken clones, and so on. Just because it has some similar elements, it doesn't mean it's the same.
So yeah, I won't be playing it. I won't be playing the sequel. I'm upset that I spent 50 hours and $60 on it, and I'm really mad about it.
Here is your main problem. You paid $60 and played 50 hours. Why buy a game that you don't know anything about? At least see a review without spoilers or with a few spoilers. Or stop playing the game when you see that it's not fun for you anymore. Buy the game on disc and sell it if it sucks. What are you saying is that you buy any big game that comes out as soon as possible and you play it even if you hate it.
Bad, but I'm still really pissed. I really hate this game. It's really dumb on a lot of different levels. It's really fetch questy, I guess, which isn't bad, but if it was more open world, I'd feel better about it.
For real? You want Final Fantasy VII to be an open world? Do you know that you already have a Final Fantasy that's an open world, right? Can we stop with making everything a shitty open world game? I get it. You don't want a story game, you just want an open world with grinding. Just like Metin or something like that. But quit saying that we need more open world. The only open world game that was fun for me was Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild. I hate open world games because 90% of the games are just a big map with a lot of useless collectibles. Want a mission? Walk half of the game just walking and collecting useless crap. No thank you, I want fun gameplay. I don't care about collectibles and long walks. I already played Death Stranding for that.
How could you pop up in the next game at level 60? Are they going to bump up the level cap to 120? Like, how are they going to do that? Are you just going to focus on other characters? Why would I invest in a game that I fucking hate? The ending was so fucking stupid to me.
I have no idea how part 2 will be if you keep your level and items, but I will not buy the game if it's something that I don't like. If the story is going to be more like a Hollywood movie instead of a wonderful story that the original Final Fantasy VII had. I love Final Fantasy VII because it had a different story and I never saw that in the movies on TV. So I will expect to start showing more of that with fewer fillers. I'm fed up with developers telling me that I like games that have a big open world that is over 50 hours long of story or something like that. No, I don't. I don't like Witcher 3 because of the big open world or because it was very long. I love Witcher 3 because of the characters and the story.
Wasted all of my money on it, and I was even trying to be guarded and let my friends play it first and give me advice. I didn't take my own advice, and now I'm burned for it.
So why even ask for their advice if you didn't listen to them? So he made some good points, but saying that this is the worst video game he ever played is kind of hard to believe. Final Fantasy VII has a lot of fillers. The side missions are garbage, but the character development was very good. I had fun playing the game and I hope that part 2 will keep it simple. Work on the good parts and the main story and forget about the stupid fillers. Anyway, let's continue with the next clip.
First of all, what classic mode is this? What do you mean classic? The classic of what? Set in, let's see. Setting the player's control character will attack and defend automatically, allowing you to focus on executing commands. The battle difficulty is the same as easy. What classic mode is this? Classic mode means turn-based RPG. Just because you told me there's a classic mode doesn't mean that it's a classic mode. That's not a turn-based RPG.
Well, that was my reaction when I saw the classic mode. I was happy that I don't have to play the new battle mechanics and that I had the turn-based version with upgraded and flashy graphics. Jokes on me, classic mode is no classic. Even if I was disappointed, I still ended up loving the new combat, and I was happy it didn't have the same annoying stuff they had in Final Fantasy 15. This told me that they will not make the same Final Fantasy 7 we know and love, with improved graphics, missions and a more detailed story. I'm a huge Final Fantasy 7 fan. It was the first game that I owned, so I love that they added new stuff. They tried to improve other stuff, but they also changed a lot of stuff. We saw just the Midgar part, and we have no idea if the rest of the story will be good. I'm not sure how I feel about the story so far, but the parts that I'm interested in was after getting out of Midgar. I'm hoping I will not get as disappointed as the people who already hate the game.
Please don't tell me the game starts like this. Please. Please don't tell me the game starts like this. Please tell me this is just for the demo. Please tell me this is just for the demo. This is embarrassing.
I have no idea what he's trying to say here, because that's how the original starts. So why you're so disappointed because the game starts this way? I really have no idea.
It's that same Brillo pad look that I just despise. It just looks, I don't understand why these companies are going with this horrible art direction. It reminds me of the Resident Evil 2 remake.
So I think the problem is that he doesn't like the art of the game. He says that it's like the Resident Evil 2 remake. Do you know what it reminds me of? Final Fantasy VII the movie? Maybe you wanted a game that's more anime looking. You don't say what was so bad about the art, because I didn't find a problem with how Resident Evil 2 Remake looks, but I also didn't mind if Final Fantasy VII Remake was like an anime. Let's be real, the game doesn't look bad, and I'm 100% sure that they had to lower the graphics so that the PlayStation 4 doesn't blow up. Every game company that wants to make a game as real as possible will have problems implementing the game for consoles. Because even if you have a PlayStation 4 Pro, they still have to make the same game for the PlayStation 4.
Fuck, bro! What kind of simplistic shit was that? I killed him by pressing square twice! All I did was press square twice. Go, bow, bow, dead.
It's the beginning of the game. There's a lot of games with easy enemies at the start. Final Fantasy VII was the same, so I have no idea what's the problem. The game became hard later, especially if you don't use your materia or items. Don't expect the game to be Dark Souls, but It gets annoying sometimes when a boss fight is taking way too long. It's not a hard boss fight, but it's long because you have to heal all the time and you don't do a lot of damage. Anyway, this video is from a live stream, so it takes way too long for him to say what exactly he dislikes and why. So let's get to the next videos because I don't want this video to become 1 hour.
Your decisions don't just impact you. Your decisions don't just impact what you do, your life, they impact everyone else. So by you supporting trash games like this that don't deserve to be supported, you're then telling developers that this is okay. That this is what the masses want. And this is not what the masses want. Well, actually, I take that back. This is what the masses want because the masses are idiots. But that's not what everybody wants is basically what I'm trying to get to. Because we have a small minority of like-minded individuals such as myself, with great taste such as myself, that do not want to support garbage like this, that do not want to see garbage like this in gaming.
I agree, my decisions don't just impact me, and we should not support trash games. So we are talking about FIFA or Fallout 76? Because I can consider a game that you like to be trash, and you can consider something I like to be trash. I hope that he explains why he thinks Final Fantasy VII Remake is so bad. The way he started is way too aggressive for people to take him seriously, but I like to give everybody a chance to let me understand their point of view. Final Fantasy VII Remake may not be the most awesome game ever, especially when you think how long it took to make it. It was close to impossible for them to make something that can justify the long waiting period, and I have no idea why they needed so much to remake under 20% of Final Fantasy VII. I'm not sure if this guy is trolling to get attention, but let's say that Square Enix wants to make you happy, but they don't sell many copies. Do you think they care that a small group of people was happy with the game? No matter what they do, it will be stuff that you don't like.
Everybody wants $60 episodic games that aren't even the real game. Everybody wants remakes that totally retcon everything, change the storyline, add pointless filler that doesn't amount to anything, and that'll be okay. That's what everybody wants. Everybody wants remakes of games to just change everything and not even be faithful to the original. People want trash games like this. How much of an idiot do you have to be to pay $60 for an incomplete game? You losers do realize that you're not getting the full game, right? And you're happy with that? Aren't you the same idiots that criticize other games for having microtransactions and not being complete and all this, yet you're running out and buying this game?
$60 for an episodic game. I understand what you're trying to say, but you don't have to pay $60. You can wait for a big discount or even for old games to come out. Then I'm sure they will make some kind of offer where you can buy the complete edition that has all the parts. I hate the fact that they do remakes instead of new and original content, but there is a lot of people who didn't play the original. You also ask why they changed the story. For real, I have no idea, and I think it's very stupid, especially if we know that everybody loved the original story. I stopped watching movies that remake old stuff, but Final Fantasy VII Remake and Resident Evil 2 Remake are the only games that I played, and I have no idea how the Resident Evil 2 original story was because I didn't play the original. Maybe they changed stories to make people interested in the new story, or maybe they think they are really smart and they can do a better job. I have no idea.
These will be the same idiots. Don't support this game, guys. It's full of microtransactions. It's bad for gaming. But let me buy a $60 game, a $60 cash grab because it has Final Fantasy on the cover. I thought it was bad to release unfinished games. Well, this game is clearly unfinished, yet you're still supporting it blindly.
Do you think that a game with microtransactions is the same as Final Fantasy VII Remake, just because it's divided into parts? Do you realize that the original is kind of the same size as part 1 of the remake, right? If you take out all the side missions and fillers, it's still a big game. Even if you don't like the changes they did, they still have a lot of parts where they did a very good job showing an improved version of the original. How is the game unfinished? The game has bugs, but I never got any big issues as I got with Days Gone before the updates. You say unfinished when you refer to the fact that the game is only part 1? I agree that they could cut some stuff out of the game and make it at most 2 parts and keep the story close to the original. You don't have to get the game when it's $60. I don't buy games that are $60. I usually don't buy a game at launch when I can wait for a big discount, get all the interesting DLCs at a very low price, and even have the latest updates so I don't have any big issues with the game. But I don't agree with you that Final Fantasy VII Remake is the same as a game with microtransactions. If you cut the fillers and stupid side missions, you still get over 20 hours of interesting stuff. I think that the remake is not a perfect game, but it's a good game. When part 2 will be released, we will know if it is a fail or not, because in part 2 things start to get interesting.
This game is copy and paste Final Fantasy 15, and nobody's going to tell me different. You don't do that. You don't sit here and take combat from a trash game like Final Fantasy 15 and throw Final Fantasy 7 on it. You don't do that. That's something you just don't do. You don't ever do that. You keep the classic turn-based combat and you leave it there.
The game is made by the same company, and some developers who worked on Final Fantasy 15 also work on the 7 remake. The combat is not the same, I know, because I finished both games and I didn't want to buy Final Fantasy VII Remake because it wasn't turn-based. I was expecting Final Fantasy VII Remake to be as bad as Final Fantasy 15. Final Fantasy 15 was a very bad game. 80% of the game was just walking and staying in a car. I felt like I'm playing an Ubisoft game, and that may explain why they made a crossover with Assassin's Creed.
A scumbag attempt to sell people the memory of Final Fantasy VII in a package intentionally designed to fool them into believing that the game they were buying was actually what they remembered as Final Fantasy VII, when the reality, as we all know, is that while there may be similar characters or locations, this game is not Final Fantasy VII at all.
Let's continue with the last video, and I think he managed to make a good point. They didn't say it was part 1 because the game wouldn't sell as well. I agree, Midgar is the most boring part and it's a very small part. I agree that many wouldn't want a whole game with only Midgar part, but here we are talking about stupid people who work hard for their money but they spend it without informing themselves. People who are made to work and spend without using their brain. You should always want to find as much information as possible about the product that you want to buy, especially if you know you worked very hard for that money. You don't want to support a company that gives you overpriced crap. This is why I didn't buy Final Fantasy. It was a gift, but I would have paid $30 for it. Many people working on the project did their job very well. But I agree that the first part of the remake is just 20% of the whole game, and over 40% is filler and boring side missions. I still think that some stuff in it was very good and I had fun playing the game. Like I said, a game that deserves at most $40. I will sell the game if part 2 is a disappointment, because in part 2 stuff gets interesting. That is why I have most of my games on disc. So even if a lot of people got a lot of dislikes, I kind of agree with most of the stuff they said. Final Fantasy VII Remake has boring side missions and a lot of content that we didn't need, but it also had a lot of interesting stuff created by hardworking people. The problem with this is that the people who run the company are the idiots who make the game boring just because they know people will buy any crap if it has a nice label. I had fun with Final Fantasy VII Remake, but they need to pick up the slack and do a better job in part 2. No stupid fillers, no boring side quests, and let the story of the original, you idiots. This is why people still love the original, because the story was great. We wanted a remake with some added stuff, but I hate it when a corporation insists on telling me what I actually want instead of what I asked for. One day people will get fed up with corporations who give them what they want, not what consumers ask for. This video was a very long video and I expected people to not have good arguments, and some didn't, but we should learn to hear people who disagree with us and understand their point of view. I'm not saying that we should listen to all the idiots on the internet. I'm saying to listen and understand people who may disagree with our point of view. Final Fantasy VII Part 1 is still a great game. I love most of the voice acting, the character development, but I also hate the useless stuff in the game. And that they clearly wanted to make the game longer than it should be, just so they can make more parts and make the game seem longer than it is. Not okay. Do a better job with Part 2 if you want the remake to be considered a good Final Fantasy VII remake.